definitely diet busting that box.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I'm conscious of time. I think we've got everyone, and obviously people. I think we've got a few people that were kind of maybe, so they can kind of join a bit later as they please. So I think we'll get going if that suits everyone. So firstly, good afternoon. Welcome to Barratt London's International Afternoon Tea. We're filming live from the Upton Gardens show home in Upton, East London. I hope that you're all well. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Catherine. I'm from Building Relations, Barratt London's PR agency. Depending on your whereabouts, I know kind of people are across the globe. Hopefully most of you will have received an afternoon tea delivery. Please, if you've got it with you, tuck into it during the event. Don't feel like you've got to stand on the ceremony. Hopefully we're hoping this is going to be kind of a nice relaxed hour and a half. I'll introduce you just to some of my colleagues who are sitting on the sofa, who you can hopefully see on one of the screens. So we've got Entella from Barratt East London.
Hello.
We've got Stuart from Barratt International, and then we've got Henry from Knight Frank Middle East, who's, I think you're in the Bakery offices, aren't you? So yeah, you're not in Upton, but yeah, we've got Henry joining us too, which is great. In terms of the journalists that we've got on the call, we've got representatives from titles across the Middle East and UK. I think we've got Al Arabiya News, Arab News, Arabian Business, and Arabist London, and then we've got Zoe, who joins us from London, who writes on global property markets for a range of UK titles. So yeah, it's great to have you all here. Thank you for joining us. So in terms of the agenda for today's event, it's going to look sort of something like this. So an introduction to Barratt London, a look at why overseas investors are choosing to buy in London at the moment. We'll have a specific look at the regeneration effect of developments like this one, opportunities for investors at Upton Gardens, and then Henry is going to do a residential market update from Knight Frank, and then at the end there'll obviously be an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you've got, and we will be doing a quiz at the end just to round things off. Just on the Q&A section, just asking, obviously it'd be great if you can all think of a question each. If you type them into the Zoom chat function, obviously the team will be happy to answer as many of those as they can at this point, so I'll be reading those out. And then for the quiz, we have got a lovely prize up for grabs, so do listen hard. We're going to be offering an all expenses paid meal at a British inspired restaurant in your city, obviously again depending on whereabouts you're located. And again, we just ask that if you can type your answers into the Zoom chat function, my colleague Harriet, who's working in the background, is going to score those. Just on a technical note, I'm sure all of you are very familiar with Zoom after the last 18 months, but if you haven't already, it's probably worth just changing on your view options to speaker view, just so that you can see the presentation, you know, just so you can hopefully read the text, and obviously we're going to be showing a video as well at the end. So yeah, that's just a suggestion if you haven't already. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the presentation and the afternoon tea. I'll hand you over to Stuart now.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you very much for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. I hope you're getting stuck into your cucumber sandwiches and cakes and everything. Don't eat too quickly, because we've got a few slides to get through. So I'll start off very quickly with a brief introduction to Barratt London, for those of you who aren't aware of the brand. So we're part of the Barratt Developments PLC, which is a FTSE 100 company. We are in the UK the largest developer by volume of sales, delivering approximately 18,000 properties per year. Barratt Developments has a national footprint, delivering new homes throughout the UK, and we operate through 6 regions and 27 divisions. We build both private and affordable housing, and in our last financial year, actually following the pandemic, we have delivered 17,000 properties, but the previous year we delivered 12,600. Barratt Developments has a broad product offering, with approximately £70,000 to over £10 million property price tags. The company was founded in 1958 by Sir Laurie Barratt and was listed in the London Stock Exchange in 1968. We build high quality homes, as recognised by our 5-star HBF Home Builder Award, and that basically means that 90% of the 18,000 properties we deliver per year, would be happy to recommend us to friends and family. We have more external NHBC awards than any other developer in the country, and West London is a large division, but East London is also delivering up to 2,000 properties per year as well. So just moving on a little bit to why overseas investors are choosing London. So you can see the chart on the top left-hand corner. So when we benchmark against the average gold price, the crude oil index, and the FTSE 100, what you can see in the red line there is the resilience of the property price market. So since 1999 all the way through to 2019, you can see that that line has consistently gone up, even through 2008, where it was a little bit flatter, but it really has stood the test of time, which is the main appeal to London property for overseas investors. Of course, just looking through the little graphics at the bottom, so there's hugely favourable exchange rates. I know Henry's going to touch on that as well. In the past, they have been very, very favourable. Now still extremely good value for money, but again, driving that sense of urgency. We do talk very often throughout the industry about an undersupply of properties across the country, and it's very much in the affordable sector in the UK and also in London as well. So not so much at the luxury end of the market, but certainly where people need properties to live in or to rent out. It's really important that they're affordable properties and there's not enough of them. So that's really where we're trying to bridge the gap. We have a population increase in London of 1 million people over the last 18 months and continues to grow steadily across the capital. And so there's lots of infrastructure improvements that we're putting in, including the Crossrail, which I'm sure you've heard of, the new Elizabeth line, which will come into operation hopefully next year. So just looking on the right-hand side, real and projected returns from different property types, really highlighting that even though investors have the opportunity to invest in retail, commercial or industrial, residential is still by far the best forecast sector, with up to 7.7% increase suggested by CBRE over the next 4 years. So just looking a little bit about the predicted growth in London. So we've had information both from Savills, CBRE, Knight Frank, and some other agencies as well. We're looking towards 2024 with 20 to 21% increase in property prices throughout London. So it's really strong growth despite there being the pandemic. It's really been a sort of pent-up demand and continuing to show strong demand going forward, driving that price increase. On top of the normal market price increase, there's also the regeneration effect. So when we buy projects such as Upton Gardens, where we are today, some of our other brownfield sites, we're delivering upwards of 500, sometimes even 1,500 properties. So when you regenerate that large area of land, put in new infrastructures, new schools, new facilities for the community, it really creates an additional price growth or regeneration effect. So you can see the chart on the bottom right here, in the light blue along the top, showing that additional capital growth, that additional investment return on top of the normal market increases in the dark areas below. So just going on to our portfolio, this represents the Barratt London portfolio across London. As you can see, approximately 3 years ago, we made a strategic decision to leave prime central London and focus on really where homes were needed, both for people to live in and also for people to rent. So you can see it's almost like a sort of donut effect around zones 3 to 5 and outwards, where we've got upwards of 14,000 properties currently under planning and on the way through construction across our 14 live sites. So there's lots and lots of regeneration going on. There's lots of activity, and we continue to purchase new land as we move forward. Of course, we're here today to talk about Upton Gardens and the regeneration and why Middle Eastern investors have chosen to purchase into Barratt London and also into Upton Gardens, which is highlighted on the right-hand side here of the map, just above London City Airport. So I'll hand over to Entella, who'll take you through the project, and then we'll come back for some questions and answers later on.
Thank you, Stuart. Welcome to this afternoon event. Thank you for joining. The Upton Gardens development is serviced by District and Hammersmith City Line, which is actually situated in the London Borough of Newham. I would like to concentrate on the London map, actually. The London map is a very interesting factor for Upton Gardens because what it highlights, the current purchasers, investors in the development mainly have purchased in this development due to the transport links, such as District and Hammersmith and City Line, and also the joining of Jubilee Line, which is one stop away, and you do actually have access via the West Ham station. Moving on, the actual development is built on a site formerly occupied by West Ham United Football Club, actually famously known as Bowling Ground. The development will cater 842 1 to 4 bedroom homes, set in 8 acres of new public space, and the prices are currently starting from 340,000. The land will be used for 15 buildings arranged around 3 large communal gardens, which will have access to all the residents within the development, along with the new tree-lined streets, which potentially you could see from the photograph taken on the right-hand side of the slides. The development also will cater for underground parking, including 64 electrical charging points, and also facilitating car club vehicles for any customers which we will not benefit from parking. We also have storage for over 1,000 bicycles underground the car parking itself, with the new and east to west cycle and pedestrian links to the development. The development also will actually build a 6,000 square foot community space, proposed cafe, proposed convenience store, which the residents along with the local area could utilize. The development will have a residence gym only, along with the concierge service. The development is situated on the Zone 3 of London, of East London, which will also benefit from 5.3 million government funding committed to enhance the immediate area. And as close to 3 minutes walk from the development, the Queen's Market will benefit from it. The 6-minute walk to Upton Park underground station will reach the city in just 15 minutes, along with Canary Wharf under the 15 minutes also. The area also offers highly rated local schools or world-class universities within a short commute. The development does actually currently sit adjacent to a primary outstanding school, which a lot of our residents have benefited from also. The local property values also have increased by 28% to 19% across London when you compare it over a 5-year period. In the development itself, estimated rental yields go up to 5%, with a young and growing local population driving the demand. And also the number of households in Newham is expected to grow by 10% from 2018 to 2028. The actual residents will benefit from on-site property management company, which will have a hassle-free investment. On the next slide, this will be the development plan of Upton Gardens, which highlights the building on the right-hand side, purpled out, which are already built and occupied from our residents, and the left-hand side yet to be occupied as still under construction. Moving on to the next slide, which would be a bit of a statement from one of our residents that have purchased in the development. I would like to read a piece of it, which actually is a statement of many of the residents, either they actually own or rent in the development. I love that we are already benefiting from excellent independent coffee shop and pubs on our doorstep, yet central London just 30 minutes away. Right, thank you so much for your time. I would like now to hand you over to Henry from Knight Frank for the London residential market update.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Just to check in on that. Okay, thank you. My name is Henry Fawn, partner of Knight Frank. I'm actually based full-time in the Middle East. This is my 10th year with the firm and 8 years in the Gulf, and I assist our Middle Eastern buyers with their UK residential property requirements. Over the next 5 minutes, I'll give you a quick run through of what's been happening in the past year or so in the London markets, both central London and prime outer London, also a little bit of the wider UK, which is good to recap on and look at things in context. So we'll jump straight on in if that's okay. Here we're looking at the prime central London versus the prime outer London areas. And what we can see here is actually the graph has been relatively steady over the past few years. We can see some small spikes there back in 2016 revolving around the EU referendum, Brexit, at the time, and since then relatively steady. The fluctuations more so in 2020 during lockdown. Now, the key point I will draw your eyes to is on the right side of our screen here, where we can see the prime outer London, the blue line here we're focusing on, is actually seeing a phenomenal spike, which means in the past 5 years, we are seeing the most active point in the market at any one time, which is great to see. Now, there's twofold at the back of that. One is that we should discuss is post the first lockdown, everyone had an opportunity to review their circumstances at home, their property, or whatever situation they might be in, whether they're buying a new home or perhaps renting, and made the decision perhaps to move on from there. And therefore, so an increase in activity we saw in prime outer London on the back of that. And secondly, we've seen the stamp duty land tax holiday, which we all know about here. We've been discussing it now for the last 6 months or so. And certainly that benefited those at certain price brackets, mostly up to around about £500,000 saw those benefits. So moving on to slide 2, please. Here we will overlay one more line on here, which I was keeping out to save clutter on the graph, but this is quite a key one, I think, and this is actually looking at the offers accepted. And this offers hopefully a slightly more smoother line than the rather jagged up and down, which is affected by those stamp duty dates. What we can see is, generally speaking, throughout 2020, and you can see that the dip for the first lockdown, since then, we have seen a steadily increasing volume of offers accepted in both prime central and prime outer London, which we're focusing on here this afternoon, which is fantastic to see. And both markets are correlating together with, generally speaking, upward trends throughout both years. Moving on, please. We now have here a reliance perhaps in central London, where a very large proportion of the prime central areas, those that are around Hyde Park, for example, do rely on overseas buyers. For those in prime outer London, which we're including in this and the wider UK in our purple line here, they rely less so on as overseas buyers, but certainly it's very important. And we can see the resilience of these markets over the past year or so. Now, drawing your eyes over to the red line, this is particularly interesting, and it shows our Heathrow Airport passenger numbers we've managed to draw through. And I've been watching these very steadily, not just from the broad figures that we have here, but I've been drilling in on these on Middle Eastern numbers, and I'll come on to that shortly. Generally speaking, the central London areas around Hyde Park certainly have been kept in terms of check on their price growth, and that's certainly been quieter over 2020. What we can see for prime outer London and the wider UK is where the local money, the local buyers there, are still transacting, and we can actually see a huge amount of growth still taking place across the wider UK, albeit the Heathrow Airport passengers aren't necessarily travelling at that time, which is great to see and fantastic for somewhere like Upton Gardens. Moving on, please. Looking back into London, and this is actually a graph here, a slide that shows where Londoners are actually looking, as opposed to before. Now we were looking at overseas comparisons. Now we're looking at those that are in London. What are they looking for? And we can see that throughout the year 2020, there was a slight decline, a dip, and then coming back up again for Londoners looking in London. So what we can say is, in conclusion of this, is that those who are already living in the London areas are still looking to move within London. Number two to that is looking around the rest of the southeast of England. And finally, for the southwest or the rest of England, that's less of interest and hasn't really fluctuated too much at all. The conclusion for this is that Londoners certainly perhaps have fluctuated throughout the few months, but have certainly settled themselves looking in London or the southeast area. Moving on, please. One more slide, if that's okay. This is something Stuart touched on 5 minutes ago or so, and I wanted to recap on this as a very significant point of what's going on in the market at the moment. There is a degree of pent-up demand across the board, and this is from local UK buyers and also those overseas. And what we can see is that actually the supply, the instructions to sell, the new business that's coming to the market is actually very few. It hasn't changed too much over the past 2 years. However, our light green line here actually represents the new prospective buyers coming into the market. These are those that are picking up the phone or sending through web inquiries or perhaps speaking with myself or the team in the Dubai office and saying, we're looking at buying real estate in London. Can you help us? And you can see these have been steadily increasing throughout. And this line, I like to think of it as the amount of pent-up demand that's been going on. The buyers are increasing throughout, yet the supply of property remains steady, which is very important looking at what we're forecasting in terms of growth for the market going ahead. Moving on, please. Now, since the past 5 years, from May 2016 until today, we had the EU referendum vote, the Brexit vote. And actually, when the sterling pound decreased in value against I've chosen a select basket of currencies here. The key one for our Middle Eastern clients, of course, is the US dollar, which the vast majority of the Middle East is pegged with. They benefited from a huge decline in that sterling pound. And at one point, with both the cooler market in London and the decline in sterling versus the dollar, the benefit, which was peaking in around December 2020, was approximately a 24% discount, if we factor that all in, from June 2016 until then, which is a phenomenal saving and represents really good value for overseas buyers with those dollars or dirhams, or whatever it might be, Saudi riyals perhaps, coming into that market. Now, if we move on a little bit closer and see how has that trend changed, actually we updated this in May this year, and we can see that actually the market in London has picked up, but also sterling has appreciated on the dollar, and certainly there's Middle Eastern currencies with that, and therefore that saving, that huge benefit we saw, has actually been eroded a little bit, all the way down to something close to 19%. So what this shows me is that there is a trigger point now and saying, look, we've seen some fantastic value that started to pull back a little bit. Is this a really good time to start looking at our next purchase or next home in prime outer London, which it could well be? Moving on, one more slide, please. So I'll wrap up on this slide of my 5 minutes. This is a particularly key one looking at this. And what we'll start is on the left side of the screen, if that's okay. In 2021, we've seen those price increases a little bit at the beginning of the year. And where are we forecasting that's going to go? We have suggested that prime central London actually almost 2 to 1 is going to grow less than prime outer London. So 2% for the full year in the centre. Prime outer London, Upton Gardens or otherwise, is growing a little bit more, 4%. And then looking at that over the coming 5 years or so, we can see that is remaining pretty much consistent throughout. If we have a quick look at that second line in there, which is the prime outer London graph, we can see that's remaining between 4 and 5% for the coming 5 years, which is fundamental for both British buyers buying into somewhere like Upton Gardens or overseas buyers from the Middle East coming in saying, look, I'm either looking for an investment, I'm looking for a second home for the family, or I'm looking for somewhere for my kids to go whilst they're studying in the UK. And this is key that both you're getting a property that you can use and love and enjoy, but also something that's a very good investment for the future. So I think this is a fantastic one to wrap up from there. I'll thank you all very much for your time. And any questions I hope to be able to assist you with at the end.
Thank you, Henry. That was great. Okay, so I think now we move on to our Q&A session. So I don't know if anyone has got a burning question that they want to ask, someone that's spoken. If people want to just come off mute and ask anything. Sure, if anyone wants to go first. Zoe, you come off mute.
Sorry. Well, it's just interesting. I mean, over the last few years, there's been a lot of sort of statistics talking about how much development is going on in the east of London compared with the west. And I wondered if you've got any sort of up-to-date figures that show that, and just how much, you know, how much the focus is shifting east, as we've been hearing over sort of recent years. And you're talking about prime outer London. How far east does prime outer London extend to now then?
Hi, Joe. I'll just take myself off mute there. Excellent. What I would suggest is we do have these statistics. This afternoon was focused on some high-level numbers here, but what perhaps I could do in follow-up is share with you our prime central and prime outer London map as it exists. That might be handy for you to get a feel for these areas and where they extend to. And then secondly to that, let's have a look at the shift to the east is what we've all been seeing over the past several years. This is not a new trend. This has been going on for some time, Zoe. So why don't we have a look at those statistics in terms of perhaps supply? And we can see where that's going looking ahead. And what I can do is I can chat with our research team. I'm working in our headquarter building at the moment and have a chat with them and see what figures we can come back with, if that's okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.
I think, sorry, just to jump in from our side, we have seen a lot of interest in East London, particularly from young professionals either working in Canary Wharf or wanting to have a little bit better value for money than they would be getting in West London. And that really, because of the value proposition, has brought over the investors as well. So whereas probably 3 or 4 years ago, we wouldn't have necessarily seen particularly people from the Middle East investing into East London, now we're seeing quite regularly both individuals, but also even family offices and institutional investments looking for real value for money and that strong rental demand, which is really driving the good rental yields in East London. As far as the, what do we consider as, the limits of central London and then perhaps a little bit further out. I mean, nowadays people aren't so much interested in what zone they're in as much as what the convenience and how quickly it is to get to where they're going. And we've seen a change in trends over obviously the last 18 months with people now looking for more outside space and perhaps not really valuing as much that quick commute into town or that quick commute to the office, but really being able to visit friends and family, be able to get out to the coast and be able to make the most of the suburbs that they live in. So that's certainly where we focused our attention. We've bought additional sites and we're building additional sites a little bit further out from Upton Gardens in New Marketplace, which is just 10 minutes down the road, but again represents excellent value for money and is really attractive to both investors and owner occupiers there as well.
Okay, any other questions? I think there was someone else.
Hi, yeah. With regard to Henry's last slide, I think apologies if you did actually mention why, but there's a huge spike in 2022 in prime central London. What's the reason for that spike in 2022?
Hi, is that Owen? I can see.
Tim,
How are you?
sorry.
Tim,
sorry.
Hi, Tim. Hi, Tim. In terms of that, the prime central London market has actually started to pick up a little bit in the past few months. So if we're focusing here on PCL, the first Q1 this year is where we saw the first uptick. And that was even a small one, sort of 0.3 to 0.6%, which is not hugely significant. But it's good to see that the central London market can stabilize and start to increase without, generally speaking, the access of overseas buyers coming in, which is fantastic. Now, looking ahead, we're still seeing flight numbers are down. From the Middle East, we may, all on this team's call here, have seen the announcements that as of October the 4th, which perhaps is a little bit sooner than we had all anticipated, but fantastic news. Most of the Gulf is now going to be opened up. It's expected that United Arab Emirates may well be included in that as well, to be able to travel freely into the UK. And we'll watch those announcements closely to see what the government comes with on that. So the 2022, which is effectively the growth over the next year from now, Tim, is focusing on overseas buyers coming back into the market. You saw the red line on one of my slides, perhaps halfway through, which was showing where most of our overseas flyers come in to, and that's Heathrow Airport, and how much that traffic is down. I've been actually looking more recently at the Middle Eastern numbers for that, and it's started to pick up already, which is great. And perhaps as of October the 4th, when most of the Gulf is going to have a quarantine period removed, we will see that pick up even further. So that's more of overseas market returning to the prime central London areas, Tim, if that gives you a rounded overview.
Fine, that's good. So, effectively, can you sort of say Knight Frank predicts huge overseas buyer-induced bounce in the London property market in 2022? Not very pithy, but effectively, can you say that?
That's where we're looking towards, Tim. We can't predict anything with a crystal ball. I don't think anybody can, but we can do our best to suggest, look, flights in theory will be open by then, and caveat that as much as we can do. And therefore, where do we forecast growth being? And that's merely the story here, Tim. But for now, from the Middle East, it's looking really positive. And I've got a lot of clients already calling saying we're flying in. Can we go and have a look at X many properties, which is great.
Just very, very quickly as well, is the data on those slides something that we can be sent?
Yep.
Is that okay? More data behind it. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll be sending a kind of a full pack out afterwards. So we'll make sure all of that comes to you, Tim. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
The forecast, Tim, I've even got that in a percentages growth table, which might be helpful as well if you want to pick out a year or two.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Alicia from Arabian Business here. I've got a question. Can I ask it now? Or
yes, go for it. Please do.
Yeah. So just looking at the Middle Eastern buyer profile for London, can you tell me what percent roughly is owner occupier and what percent is buying to let in terms of the interest that you're seeing?
We can certainly answer from Barratt's perspective. We are seeing a significant increase, as Henry highlighted as well, in the inquiry levels and the transaction levels from the Middle East. So things are changing, and I would say the last 12 months doesn't represent really the normal market conditions, but generally speaking, we would have, so approximately 15% of our total sales for London will come from the Middle East. From those, approximately 40% of them would be owner-occupiers and 60% would be investors. And that's purely based on gross development value, or the value of property that they're purchasing, and really driven more in the short term, in the recent months, with family offices and institutional investments into the UK, which obviously there's less people coming or less visits happening, but the value of those transactions is much, much higher. Did that answer your question, Alicia?
Yeah, that did. That's great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. If anyone's got another question, they'd rather just type it in the chat and I can ask it to someone. Please do.
Could I ask a question? Owen Bennett from Arab News. You talked about Middle East investors you've got so far. Have you got any idea, any figures of how many are investing in outer London, as you call it, versus inner London? How much has that changed over the past 5 years?
Oh, and for the stats on that, I can certainly delve into those numbers specifically with our research team and come back to you with an overview on central London versus outer London, perhaps, if that's helpful.
Yeah, because the implication seems to be explicitly, actually, the money is moving away from the west out to the east, and we just good to get some sort of raw figures of how much, in sort of dollars, or how much in terms of investment. That'd be great to know.
Owen, from our perspective, what we've also seen is, as we've moved out of central London and we've moved to zones 3 to 5, we didn't anticipate that there would be a great deal of demand from the Middle Eastern market, or indeed the investors, for a more affordable product. But what we've seen is people really chasing good value for money product in areas which are very well connected into central London. So although the developments are in zones 3 to 5, they're all within 25 minutes commute of central London. And what we've seen as a trend also is that the family home will still remain in West London, but the younger generation will perhaps look towards the northwest corridor or out to the east to get better value for money, and perhaps bigger space and a new build property rather than an older sort of Victorian property as well.
So would you say you were slightly surprised then by this? This was an unforeseen development?
I think certainly it is where you put your focus, you get your results, and we've put a lot of effort into promoting the product into the Middle East, and you see even in the Middle East markets they are segregated into different profiles. So for example, Kuwait and Bahrain will look more towards an affordable product for owner occupiers or second homes, whereas Saudi and Qatar still maintain that they would rather share a property perhaps between a number of different family members rather than having their own space. So there are different trends for different markets. But yeah, we were pleasantly surprised that the Barratt product appealed so much to both owner occupiers and investors, and particularly now we're seeing the family offices purchasing across the portfolio, both in East and West London, but more so moving towards East London. We had a purchaser here recently who purchased 6 properties in Upton Gardens. They preferred to do that rather than buying one larger property or higher value property in central London, and have been able to rent it all out on sort of a 1-year tenancy and achieving above 5%. So for the investors, they're really looking for, what's the best value for money that we can get in London at the moment in a good rental market, and they don't really mind where it is. It's not. I don't think it's as much them looking for either golden postcodes or particular areas. They're really chasing that value and that return on investment.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I think we'll move on then. So we'll move to the quiz.
Okay, so well, I hope everybody's been paying attention and enjoying their sandwiches and cakes. We've got a very quick quiz to go through, and I believe that you've organised a prize for the winners of the quiz. Is that right, Catherine?
That's right. So whoever wins, obviously depending on your location, we will pay kind of an all expenses meal at the idea is a British inspired restaurant. So I know some of you in London, so that's not going to be hard. But yeah, so we will organise that with you afterwards. If I can just ask, so if you're able to send me your answers on the chat, if you can do a direct message to me, just so that obviously not everyone else can see them, if everyone knows how to do that, that would be great, and then I'll just tot up the scores as we go, and then we're going to show a short video after Stuart and then Teller have done the questions, and then I'll announce the winner at the end. All right, thank you.
Super, thank you, Catherine. So we'll start off with question number 1. In what year was Barratt Developments founded? Was it A, 1944, B, 1958, C, 1963, or D, 1979? And then I'll hand over to Ntella for the next question.
Right, fantastic, thank you. Right, number 2. Which new London Underground line will carry 200 million passengers per annum and increase rail capacity in central London by 10%? A, the George Line, B, the Elizabeth Line, C, the William Line, and D, the Charlotte Line.
Super, nice easy one. So number 3, Knight Frank predicts capital value growth in prime outer London to reach 17% by which year? Is it A, 2022, B, 2023, C, 2024, or D, 2025?
Right, thank you. Number 4, in which London borough is Upton Gardens situation? Or situated, I would say better. A, Hackney, B, Tower Hamlets, C, Southwark, D, Newham. I'm sure you know this. Number 5.
Okay, so Upton Gardens is connected to London by which London Underground lines? Is it A, District and Hammersmith and City line, B, District and Circle, C, DLR and District, or D, Central and District line?
All right, number 6 question would be, how many buildings does Upton Gardens comprises of? A, 5, B, 10, C, 15, and D, 20.
Okay, moving on. So Upton Gardens is built on which Premiership football club's former grounds? Is it A, Tottenham Hotspur, B, Queen's Park Rangers, C, Millwall, or D, West Ham?
Okay, number 8, which zone is Upton Gardens located in? A, Zone 1, B, Zone 2, C, Zone 3, and D, Zone 4.
Super. And so what percentage yields can investors expect to achieve in the area? A, 2%, B, 3%, C, 4%, or D, 5%? And finally,
number 10, what is the name of the Upton Gardens closest airport? A, London City Airport, B, Heathrow Airport, C, Gatwick Airport, or D, Stansted Airport? Thank you. Good luck to the winner.
Super. So, but just before I hand over to Catherine, I know that quite a lot of you are based in the UK, so we would definitely like to invite you along to Upton Gardens or one of our other developments to come and visit us and have a look round. And likewise, the international team will be out in the Middle East in October and November. So if you get in touch with the team through Building Relations, Harriet and Catherine, and we'll make sure that we spend some time with you and answer any questions that you have. I can see the girls are quickly crunching the numbers.
You're gonna have to, yeah. I'm hoping this video is gonna last a while. You're gonna have to.
Okay, so
that you did that very quickly.
Let's hand over to the video. This is a brief overview of Upton Gardens and the local area.
I've still not done it.
Lots of great statistics in there and lots of information on the borough of Newham. I think whilst Catherine's still totting up the numbers, so I think there's a couple of trends that are worth highlighting, both from the Middle East and in the overseas market in general. So we've certainly seen an interest in second-tier cities from overseas markets, particularly the likes of Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham and Reading. But what's worth noting when you see the video of Newham is that actually most of the London suburbs in themselves are bigger than any of these secondary markets. So when we see investors looking at second tier cities as alternative investments, they very quickly chase the higher rental returns. But when you see the IRRs and the total returns for investment, then they return to London very, very quickly, seeing obviously the huge infrastructure improvements that you're seeing across the capital, but also hopefully as we return to sort of normal life, that cultural education, arts and theatre appeal also returning as well. The other thing to note is that, as Henry pointed out in his presentation, there is a pent-up demand from the Middle East, which we've never seen before really, to the extent that even the last few months, we've started to receive inquiries where people are looking to make institutional investments or buy-to-let investments, even without visiting the UK, which is very unusual for that market. So where we've seen probably in the last month to 6 weeks, obviously over August, everybody in the UK disappeared and managed to get a holiday in where they could. But there was a delay from when the announcement of people being allowed to go and book flights to actually the UK population booking flights. And I think we're seeing that still in the Middle East as well. There's still, of course, there's the news that they will be able to travel, but it will take a few weeks before those bookings go up. But obviously, investors are already getting in touch, and clearly there is a pent-up demand from the Middle East. So we're looking forward to seeing everybody in the UK, and certainly the investors that we've been speaking to through our network of agents are saying that they're going to be spending an extended period of time in the UK at the end of the summer, which is really great. So that obviously they missed out last year, but a lot of families tend to come over here for 6 to 8 weeks. They enjoy all of the cultural elements, the parks, and also even getting out of London as well. So there's definitely a pent-up demand from the Middle East, and we're watching that very carefully and looking forward to welcoming everybody to our developments. So, Catherine, have we managed to get the
2 more
the
minutes?
results?
Sorry, no, not
up?
quite. Sorry, my maths is not. It's fine. Yeah, give me 2 more minutes. Sorry, you might have to ad lib.
I was going to ask, are they if they come for those extended stays that you're mentioning, you know, they're going to come here for their 6 to 8 weeks, are they likely to come to East London to do that? Because traditionally it's been sort of a Knightsbridge thing, hasn't it? And they come and stay there and spend their money. Do you think they might disperse this year? And
I still think, as I said, that there's still the family home, which will be in West London, but certainly the investments are looking where the value is, which is not just exclusively in the east of London, but we're seeing a lot of opportunity here. Even in Newham, there's upwards of 30,000 properties under construction. So it's not just from Barratt, there's other developers that are seeing the value proposition and starting to develop. And then that sort of regeneration effect and the Crossrail coming online as well, where you'll be able to get from East London out to Heathrow in sort of 45 minutes. It really makes a difference to people's outlook on the investment opportunity more than anything.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the design of the development, have you had to rethink a lot of it since COVID? So, you know, is it now a given that everything has a terrace? Have you built more townhouses rather than apartments? Have you got, you know, X% more of green space, all as a reaction to what's happened?
Well, perhaps Natalia, you can talk about a little bit about the product.
Happy. So the development of Upton Gardens actually does comprises of 15 buildings itself, which what that means is already pre-authorized quite some time ago. What is great about it is that every single apartment will have outside space, either a terrace or a balcony, including courtyards, which every single resident will have access to, along with rooftop accesses. So in relation to changing over the occupancy from apartments to more houses, obviously the actual development has got the architecture going already approved, and then I'm afraid that is too late to change it, as we are more than halfway to finish, as by end of 2022 this development will come to an end. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, apart from the studio apartments, and even some of those, all of the properties in the Barratt London portfolio have access to some sort of outside space. So whether it's balcony or terrace, and in addition to that, we have a lot of communal terraces as well. So at Upton Gardens here, there's terraces on the 9th floor, beautiful views of the city and Canary Wharf. And the other developments have that outside space as well. So perhaps Watkin Road or number 10 Watkin Road in Wembley has, throughout the development, 6 different garden terraces, which is very, very unusual for a sort of high-rise development. But we're trying to encourage that sort of outside living, and that's really fueled by demand from people's from the buyers' trends. They're looking for more outside space, access to fresh air, but not just in the development, also accessibility to outside London as well.
Okay.
So how are we going, Catherine?
Yeah.
I mean, we only did 10 questions. So
I know.
We're doing a pub quiz tomorrow, and we've got 7 rounds. I'm glad we didn't do that today.
Well, you all did very well. We've got a tie again, which we had at our last event. So the two winners, the two that got the highest score were Nuha and Owen. So congratulations.
Yeah, very good. Well done.
We'll be in touch after today to arrange your prize. I just want to say, obviously, thank you again for everyone for attending. I hope you've enjoyed yourself and found it useful. As I think I've previously mentioned, the team at Building Relations will follow up after today with the press pack, and I've made a note of kind of some of the more specific information that some of you wanted from Henry at Knight Frank. So we'll make sure that comes across to you too. I know he's had to duck off early, but he can say if there is any kind of specific statistics or kind of facts and figures that you want from the research team, he's very, very happy to kind of source those. So please let us know and we can arrange that. But yeah, if there's anything else that you need, please let us know. And I hope you all have a lovely afternoon, and thank you once again for attending.
Thanks very much, everyone, for joining. Hope you enjoyed the presentations, and also if you would like any quotes or any further information from us as a developer, either in London or across the country, then get in touch through Building Relations, and we'll be happy to have a chat with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, lovely.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.